tell you what, it's not like the olden days. I'm Jake.
I'm Rosie.
And this is our podcast on the Mummy franchise. In preparation for this podcast, I've been trying to pin down exactly when the franchise begins, which is a subject that could be open to interpretation. As we mentioned at the end of the last podcast, the original film of The Mummy was in 1932, and that was taken and adapted, in many ways, into The Mummy movie 1999, which spawned the specific franchise we're going to be talking about.
Both of those things in the olden days?
But as it turns out, the very first zygote of the franchise can be traced back to 1903, when Bram Stoker's novel The Jewel of Seven Stars was published. And we actually looked up and found out the name of this novel when we were watching recently The Mummy, the animated series, because it's referenced in that series as Bram Stoker's The Mummy, which isn't its original title, but it would be a pretty good title for it, I think.
Yes, and if the character had said, I've read Bram Stoker's The Jewel of Seven Stars, nobody would have known what he was talking about. So I think that was fair enough. Is it possible that some pedant will contact us to say, well, actually, Bram Stoker based that story on this other story from another time?
Yes, quite possible, and we can trace ideas a long way back to the start of the written word, I suppose, in many ways. But the reason I thought that Bram Stoker's The Mummy, The Jewel of Seven Stars, was in many ways the first entry in this saga, or where it first germinated in some way, is that it was about the Mummy trying to bring his girlfriend, lover from ancient Egypt back to life, which is a theme that was taken as the basis of the 1932 The Mummy movie and continued in the 1999 one. So it's kind of the Mummy's motivation in each thing comes from Bram Stoker's original book. And yes, perhaps he's taken that from somewhere else, who knows. We were just looking up just now when it was published, 1903 I discovered. I was saying, so it was following on the success of Dracula, Bram Stoker's big novel in 1897. But when you hear in the cartoon someone say, Bram Stoker's The Mummy, you think, well that fits, does it? But it's about vampires, why not The Mummy as well? So that's why I thought it would be worth mentioning Bram Stoker's book, because it has that basic kernel of the Mummy's motivation, which is continued in the 1932 Boris Karloff one, which was on in this room at some point over the last 15 years. And he had a cauldron like Mumra, is all I remember about it.
I remember that, and I think that he could look at people in his cauldron and then hold out his hand and make that person die.
Yes, he was doing that.
I don't know why he was doing that.
But I remembered that it was Boris Karloff, as you may remember me mentioning on the end of the previous podcast, because he really is synonymous with early Hollywood horror, and I'm sure he's most famously recognised as Frankenstein's monster, which is why on Tiny Toon Adventures, when Babs is doing her impression of Frankenstein monster, Buster goes to rope it in Boris is in the soup as a great early horror actor. So it's rather memorable that he played the Mummy in that. And what I did find interesting looking up that Mummy movie was that it obviously did inspire the 1999 movie plot and characters in no small way. Because, as I discovered, the Mummy, when he is pretending to be a modern-day Egyptian living in Cairo, calls himself Ardath Bey, which is a name that is taken and used for a different character in the 1999 Mummy film. And his girlfriend, who he's desperately trying to resurrect, that's his big motivation for the whole thing, is called Princess Ankh, like the ancient Egyptian symbol for eternal life, which everybody can call to mind and recognise and knows what it is, I would hope. So no Mon, which becomes quite easily, in the 1999 version, an Aksunamun. So you can see they've taken the names and the premise and turned it into the basis for the new Mummy movie, and of course the name Imhotep. the Mummy's name in the 1932 movie and transferred to 1999. That's directly transferred, not at all fiddled with, changed like Ardagh Bay and Anxoner Mom. So you can see where the inspiration comes from. And in 1999, they were obviously making a very big thing of this fantastic summer blockbuster movie laden with loads of special effects. And I think it was probably meant to be very much sold on the strength of its special effects in some ways, as some movies were in those days. Ooh, look at all these fantastic things we can do with computers now, and it doesn't matter so much about the plot. When I was watching Van Helsing, which is from a little later, 2004 I think, I wasn't surprised to see it was from the same creative team and writer as The Mummy, because that's all a load of CG explosions and CG creatures and not really very much plot or characterization to back it up. And the same is true, really, of the Mummy movies, although not to the same extent as Van Helsing. But we first watched the Mummy 1999 movie over Christmas '02, when it was first shown on the television.
So not the Olden Days.
No, and Rosie had already been watching the cartoon series, hadn't you?
Yes, I'll tell everybody all about that, shall I? Shall I do it now? About my experience of watching the film after the cartoon?
Yes, let's go on to that.
Well, in the cartoon series, which we won't go into detail about right now, I don't think, the focus is on the O'Connell family, Rick, Evie, their son Alex, and Evie's brother Jonathan, who's not called O'Connell. And so that was what I thought Mummy was all about. And then we watched this film, and in the film, Rick and Evie haven't even met each other yet. And I very quickly realised this is the story of how they meet. Very much looking at it from the point of view of a fan of the cartoon there, I suppose. The prequel to the cartoon I was enjoying. And I wasn't exactly surprised. I thought, oh yes, that makes a certain amount of sense. That in this movie, the couple get together because it's a love story, because that's what happens in Hollywood. And one thing I noticed was that they all had different hair, which is something that fans of the movie have on their list of things they hate about the cartoon. And I thought, oh, they've all got different hair. But I didn't mind, like people mind it being different in the cartoon. And then I thought, well, if they all had that hair in the cartoon, they'd all have the same hair. So, I can see why that was changed.
Yeah, it's rather like what they did to make the real Ghostbusters, with the hair from the movies all being just brown.
And I remember thinking, oh yes, there's Rick, he's got, like, trapped in this cage on one of his adventures by annoying some local people or something. And oh yes, here's Evie, she's working in the museum with some glasses on, being librarian-y. And oh yes, here comes her brother Jonathan, and one of his first lines is, my dear sweet baby sister, or something, and I think, yeah, I know. But even if you don't know, it's a bit of a clunky line. And a lot of people absolutely love this movie, and as I mentioned, vilify the cartoon. And the last time I watched The Mummy and The Mummy Returns, which we haven't talked about yet, I was saying, oh, I like that film less every time I see it. But I didn't know why, and I thought, well, I'll watch it and see if I can figure it out. And when we first watched it, and the few times after that, I did enjoy it. And even now, thinking about it, I think of the bits with potential, like the love story spanning millennia, and the cast is pretty good, the main cast anyway, and bits like Evie surprising everyone with her camel riding abilities after she's been this librarian character, and all the desert location and adventure and magic, and on paper it's quite good. But the thing I do remember noticing when I last watched it, and I enjoyed it less than ever, is that when they try and be funny, it falls completely flat.
We used to laugh at some bits of it, like Rick holds up the cat and goes, look what I got to scare him, Hotep. But now it just seems really trite.
I can't remember any other specific bits, I'm afraid, but I do remember watching Omid Jalili in particular and thinking, oh, they're trying to be like really funny and it's not working. And I can't remember what else is really wrong with it. Perhaps just the whole adventure location, love story, doesn't quite get to where it should.
It's one of those things that we've come back to in recent years, knowing what it is and what it's like, being familiar with the atmosphere and where it's all going, and thought, oh, it's not actually that much good, rather like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which we'll talk about next year, and episodes of Hey Arnold without Helga in them. We'll talk some more about Hey Arnold in our update podcast, as you may remember. Yes, I remember being quite keen to see The Mummy Returns, which is the 2001 sequel, after watching The Mummy originally.
I remember, before you carry on, thinking, I just wonder if Alex is in that. I bet he is.
Yes, of course. And again, it has the same problems as the original. I used to get quite enthused by the end of, or almost the end of The Mummy Returns, where Rick and Imhotep are hanging off the collapsed floor into the abyss of the underworld, soul reaching for them, and Evie risks everything to come across and rescue Rick, and Anaxunamun won't do it for Imhotep, and Imhotep gives Rick and Evie this look like, well, you're lucky then, aren't you? I've done it all for nothing. And it always makes me think of Adrian Mole and the Swans. I envied them their relationship. And then Imhotep gives up and falls into the pit of souls because he realises Anaxunamun doesn't care most about him in the universe at all. And I found that quite a powerful ending, and that moment of understanding between Imhotep and the O'Connells. Of course, Rosie pointed out an extra dimension to that whole set of affairs.
Yes, in fact, neither Anaxunamun nor Imhotep was doing it properly, because before Evie runs across all the death and things to save Rick, he's going, no, Evie, go, run away, save yourself, let me fall into this pit, it doesn't matter what happens to me. And then Imhotep goes, Anaxunamun, help me, in his native tongue, with subtitles, but saying quite the opposite of what Rick was saying. So, yes, not doing it properly at all either.
And you might wonder, would Imhotep have run across the room and risked himself to save Anaxunamun? I would hope he would. He'd done so much to bring her back to life several times, risked so much, been mummified and killed and all sorts of things so many times.
Yes, he just draws the line before Rick of asking her to risk herself when he's doomed anyway.
So perhaps their relationship had its problems, but I think as a motivation, I found it a lot more compelling than the toned-down motivation for the cartoon. Imhotep was an evil high priest and wants to use the manacle of Osiris to rule the world, but then, of course, that's very acceptable and accessible for a children's cartoon version.
Talking about Imhotep speaking in his native tongue, I've remembered some inconsistencies and things that don't quite make sense that I find a bit annoying. I don't know if you agree with me. One is Evie claiming to be able to read hieroglyphics and ancient Egyptian. Well, hieroglyphics is ancient Egyptian written down, and she can also read ancient Egyptian out loud, which nobody can do. So that's slightly annoying, very inaccurate. The other thing is their idea about reincarnation. People come along with the same body, and it's all like, oh yes, you're Nefertiti reincarnated, and you're an Anaxunamun reincarnated, and that's why you look like her. But we need to get her soul and put it in you. But actually, reincarnation is the other way around, so that's annoying.
The woman goes to Imhotep and the mummy returns, I am the reincarnation of Anaxunamun. He goes, only in body, but that can be remedied or something. Yes, it doesn't make a lot of sense, not even enough sense in that movie universe.
And then, of course, in the first movie, Imhotep, while he's still a CG sort of animated rotting corpse sort of thing, not that he would be rotting as a mummy, but not in his quite actor form anyway, sees Evie and goes, Anaxunamun. Make more sense, it turns out, in the sequel, if he saw her and said Nefertiti, because that's who she is.
Yes, they changed their mind about that one in between.
Another thing we're not so crazy about, either of us, in The Mummy Returns, is the actor playing Alex. Like Freddie Highmore, that I think we've talked about this, and Georgie Henley, he might be perfectly nice and engaging child if you met him on the street or whatever, but the kind of acting that Hollywood likes English children to do, saying things like wardrobe and bracelet and being overly cute, doesn't suit English children.
Yes, and I shall elaborate a little on that as a kind of bridge to the next point in a moment. You were reminding me of the Tomorrow People from the 1990s, which we may podcast about at some point, which has one with some ancient Egyptian stuff going on. And there's a character in that, an Egyptologist, who makes the very astute point that nobody knows what ancient Egyptian sounded like. It's a dead language, it's not spoken in living memory, and we can make the translations between the hieroglyphics and the modern language using the Rosetta Stone, very famously, but the phonics of it is lost. And of course that's one thing that they didn't appreciate making the Mummy movies, which detracts from the enjoyment quite a lot once you've seen the Tomorrow People.
I've said, haven't I, that the main cast are quite good, apart from Alex, who the role doesn't really suit, and I don't know his name, you know his name?
Yes. His name is Freddie Both.
Oh, Freddie again. Perhaps he and Freddie Highmore would rather have been called Fred, but Americans were like, oh no, you have to be called Freddie, it's so cute. And one thing I do not mind that he does actually is his interaction with John Hannah, who plays his Uncle Jonathan, and I think the fun uncle-nephew relationship, much more loose and less strict than the parent-child relationship, is true to life and quite engaging. Same thing in the cartoon, actually. And yeah, John Hannah's alright, isn't he? And then Evie is played by Rachel Weisz, and I thought she was quite good too. One thing I do remember not minding is when she is explaining about Imhotep seeing her and calling her an axe on a moon, and then he tried to kiss me. And it's quite funny the way she says that. Not laugh out loud funny, certainly not anymore, but I think she played the role very well. And then Brendan Fraser as Action Man, Rick O'Connell, he's alright as well. And I can't remember the name of the Imhotep actor.
He's called Arnold Vosloo. And I did know the Anaxunamun woman at one point. It's Patricia, then something quite long beginning with V, Vasquez or something like that.
And they're alright too, aren't they?
Yes. So, as a kind of bridge to the cartoon, and indeed to say a word or two about the third Mummy movie from 2008, I wanted to do a little analysis about Alex. Perhaps just before that we'll mention that they attempted to make a spin-off series in The Scorpion King, and the movie of that was released in 2002, the year after The Mummy Returns, and the character debuts in The Mummy Returns, and I always worried he was going to kind of take the spotlight, steal it from Imhotep, but he didn't, so that was good, and he was rather underused in The Mummy Returns, really. But we watched the Scorpion King movie when we watched the Mummy movies on the videos we have of them, and that has the same problems, doesn't it? It tries to be funny, but isn't, and it's just rather badly done.
Again, when I think about it now, not having seen it recently, I do remember the bits I quite liked. Very memorable is where this, like, pharaoh person is saying to the woman with magic powers, oh, you've been having it off with the Scorpion King, and I'm going to prove it because you told me that if I had sex with you, you'd lose your magic powers. So here's how I'm going to test you. You have to open the one of all these baskets which doesn't have a poisonous snake that will jump out and kill you. And then she's acting all worried, and we think, oh dear, she's had it off with the Scorpion King, she's not a virgin anymore, she won't be magic, maybe a snake will kill her. But then she opens a basket with a snake in and uses her magic powers to control the snake and make it turn on the evil man, because actually she was lying just to stop him from taking advantage of her, as she put it later. You think of a better way to stop a king from taking advantage? Neither could my ancestors. Something like that, she says.
And I was remembering this character who's the kind of sidekick to the Scorpion King and is extremely unfunny. I think you wiped him from your memory. So unfunny.
I don't remember him at all. I remember the child who's with him for a while.
Oh, I've forgotten that.
The one bit that made me go, oh, I remember that from the trailer, is a bit that's supposed to be funny. For some reason, the Scorpion King and this child are running away from this angry mob. And the Scorpion King's going, you kill half, I'll kill half. And the child looks at him and he goes, alright, I'll kill them all. And I think The Rock, the actor playing the Scorpion King, pulls that off as well as anybody can. So I guess that's why it's memorable. It's not one of the worst bits, but no, I don't remember the unfunny sidekick.
And there are some other films, a couple of other films from elsewhere in the noughties, and possibly the teens, attempting to fill in the gaps between that Scorpion King movie and where the Scorpion King gets to by The Mummy Returns, without Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and probably even if I get the chance, I wouldn't want to watch them, but there they are, they do exist, and it's all spun off from Bram Stoker's novel,
Jewel of Seven Stars.
And possibly even somewhere before that, so worth mentioning. But thinking about Alex, I've sometimes wondered, now why in The Mummy Returns have I always found him one of the most awful, hard-to-watch, nauseating characters in anything ever? Rosie's explained a bit of that already, and that is indeed why. Whereas in the cartoon, why do I find Alex one of my favourite characters, protagonist, boy hero characters in anything that I've ever watched? And I think, well, they are very different, I suppose. I can see why I feel differently about them. But you can see that they are meant to be the same basic character, or they come from the same original thoughts of what the character was going to be like. He's supposed to be the best of Rick and Evie, and greater than the sum of his parts.
I remember now, I wanted to point this out. Brendan Fraser spells that out for us in The Mummy Returns when Alex has been taken off by Imhotep because he's wearing the magic bracelet that leads them to a special place where Imhotep wants to do something magic. And to reassure Evie, Rick says to her about Alex, he's smarter than you, he's tougher than me, and I think, yeah, okay, we get it.
He's supposed to have, and indeed does, in both forms in some way, Rick's Indiana Jones adventurer type stuff and Evie's smarts, and they're supposed to combine, as I say, to become greater than the sum of their parts. And he's supposed to be quite resourceful, quite sassy, and a good protagonist. And that is true in the cartoon and in The Mummy Returns. So I think, why is there this huge discrepancy between the characters? And, as Rosie was mentioning, it really is because of the casting. All these snappy, sassy lines that Alex has in The Mummy Returns are written in American, which, yes, is a form of English, isn't it? But it's not a good form of English to force these English child actors to read out. They just end up sounding stupid.
Yes, it's not unrealistic that he would say these things having an American father, but then when you're watching it on the television or in the cinema, you want it to sound good, and it just doesn't, does it?
When they have him say things like, Mum, Dad, I can explain everything, and I need to go to the bathroom to distract the baddie and things like that. They've obviously thought, the makers, oh my god, we'll get a cute little British kid to say it, it'll be so fantastic, we'll have a speech impediment. Whereas what they actually needed to get to say it was a charismatic young American actor who could bring the lines and the character to life well and appropriately. And if they'd done that in The Mummy Returns movie, I think Alex would have been a lot more successful as a character. I mean, I think it's asking a lot of Freddie Both to pluck him out of his school play, which was apparently the only acting experience he'd had, and get him to say all these American lines that are obviously going to sound wrong coming out of him. So it's really not his fault, but it does add to my rather negative view of that movie, how badly Alex is done in it. Whereas in the cartoon, they get an American actor, and we spotted, didn't we, a script that didn't realise Alex was going to be American in it, and assumed that he was going to talk with the British accent, like Evie and Jonathan. And thank God they went for the competent young American actor doing a very engaging performance to voice Alex in the cartoon and carry the show in many ways. And that is really what makes the difference, what brings the character of Alex to life appropriately and allows him to develop into such a good protagonist for the cartoon series. Talking briefly about their attempt to relaunch the movie series in 2008 with The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, I'm always reminded of the scene at the beginning where we first see the character of Alex in the movie, and he's supposed to be well into his 20s at that point. And he's obviously not supposed to be the same version of Alex from the cartoon series because he is doing some sort of archaeology. He's not the supreme Medjai. The Medjai as a concept is not mentioned in the third movie. Ardeth Bay, the main Medjai character, is not in the third movie. So this version of Alex is very distinct from the cartoon version. They're both offshots of the Alex from the second movie, the cartoon version, and the Tomb of the Dragon Emperor version. But one thing I did notice, even when I first saw Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, was that they had dressed this version of Alex in his costume from the cartoon series. And I really do think that must be a deliberate nod to the cartoon series. Otherwise, why would they bother getting hold of this particular shade of blue shirt that really doesn't match anything that anyone else in his archaeology company is wearing? A definite nod to the cartoon series there, and perhaps acknowledging that Alex from the cartoon series is one of the very best things to come out of the Mummy franchise. Well, maybe, but certainly nodding to the cartoon series there, indisputably, I would say.
People who love and get very dampened over the first two Brendan Fraser movies do hate Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, and I hated it a lot before I really realised I didn't like the other two Mummy movies that much, I think, at this point, and I refused to watch it a second time, knowing how much I disliked it the first time. Jake has seen it twice, just to make sure he understands what's wrong with it, haven't you?
Yes, there's a few movies I wanted to watch twice, just to make sure I knew why I didn't like them. Pirates of the Caribbean 2 and 3, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy movie, and The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon Emperor among them.
A very notable thing about it is that Rachel Weisz did not return, and the part of Evie was recast, and I read that it was because Rachel Weisz had read the script and said, "I'm not doing this."
And what a wise decision! Apparently, Brendan Fraser and John Hannah and the new Evie, Maria Bello, who used to be in ER, were all signed on for 3 new movies to make a new Mummy trilogy. And then it was completely abandoned because everybody hated it. And they have, this year actually, attempted to relaunch the franchise with a new female Mummy movie, and Tom Cruise is in it. And goodness knows what that's like, but probably no good.
Fans of the first 2 Brendan Fraser movies have already decided that they hate that, and in fact they decided that 1 or 2 years ago, I remember reading, so I guess that's not going to go very well. There have been some sexist comments as well about the Mummy being female, and about whether people who like female protagonists are going to be dancing for joy because there's a female Mummy, or getting cross about her being an antagonist, and all sorts of terribly sexist, abusive things I read about this. I don't know why. I think it was in the off-topic forum of another forum I was looking at, in fact. Going back to Alex in that movie, I do remember one thing I didn't like was that actor.
Oh yes, Luke Ford, I think was his name.
Yes, he has an American accent, but it's an annoying one, I found, and I seem to remember he's very much the same sort of thing as the lad who played Alan Tracy in the Thunderbirds movie, which everybody hated, and the character who would become Captain Kirk, James Kirk, in that movie everybody loved. I don't know if any 2 of those 3 are the same person or not, but not the kind of young American I find engaging anyway. And wasn't Alex, the character, sort of swaggering in and being rude and arrogant towards Rick?
Yes, he was, and he had quite a bad relationship with both his parents. I think, which isn't very nice, particularly if you enjoy the version of the family dynamics and exciting, compelling family teamwork support network that we were enjoying in the cartoon series recently. So yeah, everything about those two alternate versions of Alex after the Mummy Returns are quite different from each other, with only that one scene of costume to link them in any way. One criticism I was reading that people didn't like about Tomb of the Dragon Emperor was that the Terracotta Army, who were in it under Jet Li, weren't proper mummies. They were just accidentally fossilised bodies under the Great Wall of China. I thought, well, that's a bit of a pedant writing that.
Kind of mummy, though, isn't it?
If it was a good quality film, they should perfectly well qualify as mummies in anyone's estimation, I think.
Yes, it seems that there is a faction of people who love those two movies about Imhotep and hate anything which is related to it but not exactly the same. And that's their business, isn't it? They are very vocal about it online, though, aren't they? So one does come across it.
Which brings us very nicely into concentrating on the cartoon series. And as you were pointing out, people have been very rude about the cartoon series in their comments about it online. Before all the forums were removed from the Internet Movie Database, there was a load of abuse of the cartoon on its page on the movie database, and as you were saying, one objection people had was that the hair wasn't the same, which is a rather silly objection, and they were just abusing it because they felt it wasn't exactly the same as the two movies.
Very recently I came across The Mummy on TV Tropes for some reason. I don't know what I was doing there. But I do think TV Tropes ought to be objective. It's not even a forum of people's opinions. And there it is saying the Mummy cartoon was an attempt to cash in on the success of the Mummy movie trilogy. And it said some other quite scathing things. And I thought, come on, TV Tropes, you're only supposed to report the facts.
As I was saying when we were watching the cartoon recently, I think they did a very good job of taking what they needed, in essence, not the hair colours, from the movies, and turning it into this premise for a cartoon series. As was mentioned before, they fiddled with Imhotep's backstory to make him more evil and his story less sexual. The manacle of Osiris that he was after was the adaptation of the bracelet of Anubis from The Mummy Returns, which Alex got stuck on his wrist for a bit, and so in the cartoon he gets the manacle of Osiris stuck on his wrist. It's taken from, it's based on the movies in that way. Of course, if you try and look up the difference between Osiris and Anubis, you find that there really isn't much. I've often found myself wondering, well, are they actually the same entity? And in many ways they are. There's a lot of overlap. If you want a distinction, Osiris would be the god of the dead and Anubis the god of the underworld, but they often seem to be used interchangeably when you read stuff about ancient Egyptian folklore and stuff. The death and the underworld often seem to be the same thing. So the manacle of Osiris and the bracelet of Anubis are very much the same thing. And they took from the movies the family dynamics and the basic idea that Imhotep was this undead mummy who was opposing them, and he had his lackey, Colin Weasler in the cartoon, who people have written is based in some ways on his lackey from the first film. And I suppose he's not unlike him in many ways, all sycophantic and bumbling.
I remember watching the first film, having been watching the cartoon series, and seeing that chap with dark hair and glasses and thinking, oh, is that Colin Weasler? And I think that wasn't his name at all, and he ended up getting his eyes and tongue removed and then being eaten by scarabs or something like that. So it wasn't the same character, but perhaps he did inspire Weasler's look.
Yes, I should think so, and his interplay with Imhotep is something they feel they wanted to bring over into the cartoon with a different character. And of course they brought over Ardith Bay and the Medjai to a certain extent. They're not in the first series that much. And I thought, yes, that's a good amount of stuff to bring over from the movies and adapt into this cartoon premise where the O'Connells are going round the world looking for, on the trail of the Scrolls of Thebes, in order to get the manacle off Alex's wrist. And the Scrolls of Thebes are a good overriding quest to string the series together.
I wouldn't really hesitate to use the word MacGuffin there. I think that's okay, because they are, but it's a reasonable MacGuffin, I think. They need this one thing to do this one thing, and Imhotep's after them as well to do another thing, and they're trying to get it, and that's fine.
And then for the second series of the Mummy cartoon, the second and final series, it aired between 2001 and 2003, and there was just over a year's gap between the end of the first series and the beginning of the second. But for the second one, they've obviously gone back to the wheelhouse and deliberately taken some more ideas and inspiration from the movies. They've taken Anaxunamun, as she's called in the cartoon, and rewritten her story. She's an evil priestess now, and rewritten her interplay with Imhotep. They have taken Princess Nefertiti out of the films and said, yes, in this universe too, Evie is her reincarnation, but they didn't know that before, and they redo the scene where Evie gets brought back to life and Princess Nefertiti is inside her for a bit. And I, having watched the Mummy cartoon quite a few times over the past year or so, I thought to myself, well, I don't think going back to the wheelhouse and bringing in all that extra stuff from the movies was really necessary. I think they had enough of it in season 1. And of course in season 2 they retitled the cartoon series The Mummy Secrets of the Medjai, and they really up the Medjai stuff as Alex does his training to become the Medjai warrior.
I wonder if they were trying to appease those rude movie fans with some of that stuff.
It's possible. And I think there's a lot to be said for Alex's Medjai journey, although, as we'll say in a bit, it's not the only path you could have taken him down successfully after the first series. But one problem I think I have with the second series is that it doesn't often match up the two elements of its title. It's either a The Mummy episode or a Secrets of the Medjai episode, and you don't really get a lot of interplay. Episodes 3 and 4 of that series are all Secrets of the Medjai stuff, and you don't see Imhotep at all. And you've got Alex having some interplay with his fellow young Medjai and defeating the Dark Medjai, and then in the next episode meeting his grandfather who's been estranged from Rick all these years, and his grandfather has this Medjai tattoo, and that's why Alex has Medjai blood. So that's all Secrets of the Medjai stuff for 2 episodes. And then the next episode we go back to the old status quo, and we find Rick, Evie, Jonathan, Alex going after this MacGuffin-y object. I'm sure Rosie would like to talk about those in series 2 in a moment. And they are saying, oh, we better get to it before Imhotep and Weasler do. And I think, well, I know why Imhotep and Weasler were after the Scrolls of Thieves in the previous series. Why are they after this sudden MacGuffin that you lot are coming after randomly at the beginning of this episode? So I always think that the whole status quo in season 2, the old season 1 status quo, seems kind of redundant to me. I do think the Secrets of the Medjai element is more interesting, and at an appropriate juncture I will come back to that point as we discuss the episode Trio from late in series 2.
What about these MacGuffins, then? When Jake produced this DVD of the Mummy cartoon a few years ago, to my great astonishment, because I'd thought of it as something I used to watch in the early noughties and enjoyed at the time, and then not really thought about since.
We just watched the videos of the movies, and I thought, God, I'm sure the cartoon is better than this. I better buy this DVD that's just come out, and we will find out.
And I thought, oh, great, I'll be interested to watch that. I used to enjoy that when I was younger, and a few things I noticed. Chief among them was that the second series, The Mummy Secrets of the Medjai, had them constantly chasing the MacGuffin of Marklar. You know, the goblet of Odin and the ring of Eric the Red, and I'm making those up, those aren't real examples, but you could insert any kind of treasure and the name of some kind of mythical figure and you're about there, and it was a different one every time, and they're supposed to do different stupid pointless things just so they can go around and find the mummy and fight over him for some MacGuffin.
And even the Secrets of the Medjai aspect of the series, as opposed opposed to the mummy aspect of the series, has a load of MacGuffins too. The medallion of the Medjai being a big one. And there's that episode that is rather a good episode where Alex goes back in time for some reason and accidentally inspires the founding of the Medjai, becomes the original Medjai. It's always nice little predestination episodes like that. And it turns out at the end, Imhotep caused the earthquake at the beginning with the staff of tremors, and you're like, God, they can't do anything without inserting a MacGuffin, even if we don't see it. It's rather lazy, really. One of the things, as I was mentioning, that the DVD box says we might enjoy about the series is exciting family teamwork, and it's true. And this, I think, as I also mentioned, is something that was missing from Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, the good, compelling family dynamic. And just because they don't like each other in that movie, they make us think it is compelling. But actually, I think it's much more compelling if they have a good family relationship. They do cooperate and do all these exciting and daring things very well together, Alex and Evie and Rick and Jonathan joining in at times, and they also support each other very well emotionally, don't they?
Yeah.
They understand each other and don't do petty recriminations against each other and do good teamwork in that way. And I think that's a really good core dynamic to have in the cartoon. Makes them compelling characters and compelling as a group of characters. And of course, sometimes they find Jonathan annoying and a bit of a liability and they tease him and stuff. But he is an important and appreciated part of the team when it comes to the crunch. That's why it's rather anomalous in that season 2 episode where Rick suddenly hates him and wants to get rid of him, and they suddenly have this arbitrary beef, which really we haven't seen in the series so far.
Having said that, when Rick turned around and said, "You've become a liability, Jonathan," I sort of went, yeah, because in the first couple of episodes of season 2, he does the stupidest things because absolutely no reason except that the writers are a bit lazy and think it would be funny. First of all, they're climbing down this rope ladder out of the Zephyr, which is a blimp, and Jonathan's driving it and he presses a button going, oh, I wonder what this does, and it makes the rope ladder fall off. I mean, come on. And then when Evie is dead, his sister Evie, and he's got some magic eternal life water, well, perhaps not eternal, but resurrecting water to save her life, he chucks it over the cliff. And in fact, I think I said, oh, come on, Jonathan's too stupid now.
Yes, they really did dumb him down for season 2. Then one of these anomalous writers comes in and creates extra beef with Rick. But what I did like about that was how much Alex stood up for Jonathan and was encouraging him to prove himself in that episode. So there we go. Even the bad bits have their redeeming qualities.
Yes, I was saying I like that uncle-nephew relationship, and in that episode you were mentioning where the writer was thinking Alex would sound English, and he's saying, my uncle taught me cricket. I think, oh yes, I can just imagine that. Jonathan teaching Alex how to play cricket. That's nice.
So there we have basic thoughts about the setup of both series and the dynamics, character relationships that pervade the two series. We'll talk a little about the interpretations of the characters. I think Rick in the cartoon series is very well done. He has a sort of Indiana Jones vibe. He's voiced by an actor called John Schneider. I think does a very good job. And instead of all the guns and things that he has in the films, he has Rick's dynamite, which he uses in various situations. He's always using his whips and stuff, which I think makes the Indiana Jones vibe quite strong. And I think the voice work is very good. I like the bit where he's turning into a werewolf and he's doing these wolfish qualities to his voice acting. I think his kind of faux heroic voice acting, like He-Man voice acting, is quite good. And he has these rather good quips that all interplay with Imhotep, doesn't he? Imhotep going, you are only delaying your fate, and Rick goes, ain't that what life's all about?
Yes, I like that one. I really like the bit where Evie was dead. I thought he was acting that particularly well. His wife Evie is dead and Jonathan's come bouncing along talking rubbish and he's going, Jonathan, like, don't be all annoying now, your sister's dead.
The other bit of Imhotep one I liked was when they're mucking about on this hay cart And Imhotep goes, "Your efforts are futile." And Rick says, "No one likes a backseat driver."
Ah, yeah.
Because that wasn't what Imhotep was talking about at all, really. But I know I've been driving with people who I thought weren't driving very well and have said in some way, "Your efforts are futile." It's very good, true to life. So yes, a very good all-round voice performance there, I think. We were discussing, I couldn't think of anything else that John Schneider was in. And you said maybe that's like the guy who does Bucky O'Hare, his one brilliant, defining lead role.
Yes, if you look up that guy who does Bucky O'Hare, sorry, I can't remember his name, on the Internet Movie Database, it will mostly just say additional voices, or man, or something.
And then you've got Gray DeLille. She's got a different surname nowadays, I can't remember what it is, as Evie. And we're more used to hearing her on things like Danny Phantom and Scooby-Doo incarnations, various incarnations, with her American accent. But of course she's doing Evie's British accent in this. And like all things where Americans do a British accent, or indeed British actors do an American accent, it's not what it could be, is it? But it's perfectly adequate for this 20 minutes children's cartoon. And she does rather well with some of the material she's given.
Yes, no one can do it perfectly or near perfectly without accent training, and I'm sure they didn't splash out on accent training. If you have it for a film, I'm pretty sure this is true, your accent trainer takes you through every single line and tells you how to say it. Gray DeLille wouldn't have had that, so how is she supposed to know that we say photograph but we say photographic? It just doesn't make sense.
And of course there's a lot of funny Americanisms that don't sound right in the faux English accent. You couldn't find your fanny and your I can't remember how it goes ever, that one. But if she tells Weasley he couldn't find his fanny somewhere, and I say, yeah, well, he probably hasn't got one.
Yes.
And that thing about the accent is also true of Tom Kenny, who played Jonathan, whose surname is Carnahan, we didn't ever mention.
No, I just said it wasn't O'Connell, didn't I?
And he, too, does a perfectly good job with the fake English accent for the cartoon as it stands.
Not quite as good as Gray DeLille, if I may say so. Sorry, Tom Kenny.
What Tom Kenny's probably best known for nowadays, and he probably started doing it about the time he was doing Jonathan, is SpongeBob SquarePants. And he's also the mayor and the narrator on the Powerpuff Girls, so he gets around a bit. And one of the movie database threads about the cartoon series used to say, before it was removed, how could Tom Kenny do this? And I thought, well, what do you mean by that? Do you think he's not doing the cartoon voice well enough, or the cartoon's not good enough for him? I think both of those are wrong. It's a perfectly suitable cartoon for him to be in, and he's doing a perfectly good job as Jonathan with what he's got.
That really is unreasonable, having an opinion and expecting someone that you've never met to agree with it.
Quite. Jim Cummings as Imhotep and the narrator in the first series opening narration, and most additional voices you'll hear in it, including the British Museum curator and the leader of the Cloud People. Jim Cummings is in everything, absolutely everything, from Monterey Jack in Chip and Dale to Ray the Firefly and the Princess and the Frog to even more recent things. He's been voice acting in practically everything you can think of for more than 30 years. He's Ed, the hyena in The Lion King. He just gets everywhere, Jim Cummings. And he does quite a good job with Imhotep, I think. And I think it's a difficult role to play in the cartoon. One thing I used to say about Imhotep when we were first watching the series through, we didn't really discuss it when we watched it this time, was how he doesn't really have a lot of banter interplay with the goodies. When Rick's doing those quips to what Imhotep says, Imhotep doesn't really respond in any way. It doesn't really have any nice, interesting back and forth dialogue, and a lot of what he says is just general angry, impatient stuff, abusing Weasley, things like that. And I think there's more they could have done to bring the character to life, Imhotep, and give him some more dimensions. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, it is difficult in the cartoon. It's an extension of changing his motivation and basic nature to just evil, wants to take over the world.
Yeah, so Imhotep becomes a slightly lost character in the whole cartoon premise, and playing him obviously is difficult, but I don't think there's anything wrong with Jim Cummings' performance, and I think he makes the most of it almost always. And the other main voice is Michael Rice, which has a Z on the end, as Colin Weasler, and like Evie and Jonathan, he does this fake English accent and plays the character rather well, creepy, sycophantic, bit of a coward when it comes right down to it, and adds as much as he needs to the cartoon as a whole. Is that a fair comment?
Yes, very much so.
Of course, one of your favourite bits that you told me about, 17 years ago, that you'd enjoyed watching, was between Weasler and Imhotep when they went to New York and were trying to hail a cab, and Weasler's doing it rather ineffectively. Taxi! Bit camp. And Imhotep stops the taxi physically and throws the person who's hired it out, going, "Be gone!" And Weasler says,
"Are you sure you've never been to New York before?"
And that is funny, because Imhotep seems to fit in quite well in New York, doesn't it?
Yes, in fact, I think that's the first episode I watched. It's the one with Babe Ruth and things like that going on, and my uncle taught me cricket, and some interesting family dynamics in that one, and I can see why it got me interested in the series. The combination of those things.
Yeah, I really like that one. The Orb of Aten.
Oh no!
Which is a MacGuffin. And I meant to say earlier, there are in Series 1 a couple of additional MacGuffins as well as the Scrolls of Thieves that they get kind of diverted into playing around with while looking for the Scrolls of Thieves. The Orb of Aten is a big one, and there's the Staff of Set, I think it is another one which controls the elements. So shades of Series 2 coming along there, but they get away with it in Series 1. But yes, I really like that New York one for many, many reasons, and that scene with the taxi driver is a highlight.
Absolutely hilarious bit is in the Alex, Evie and Rick having fun montage where they're on this roller coaster and Alex and Evie are going woo and Rick's going ah. It's hilarious because he doesn't mind doing that kind of thing if he's fighting Imhotep at the same time while trying to get him a MacGuffin, but he just gets freaked out on an ordinary roller coaster.
Crediting the viewers with intelligence there, and that is a good thing to do. And then, of course, another mainish cast is Ardeth Bay, who's voiced by an actor called Nicholas Guest, who can be heard doing an absolutely horrible Irish accent that's actually Scottish in the werewolf episode as another character. But that's easy to do, isn't it, particularly if you haven't had accent training. And Ardeth Bay in the cartoon talks a lot of rubbish, doesn't he?
Oh my god, yes! At the end, the season finale of season 1, where the Scrolls of Thieves have been destroyed and all sorts of things have happened, he turns around and says, Imhotep will certainly want to destroy the world. Well, no, he doesn't, actually.
He doesn't at all. And then whenever he was saying things in season 2, he was saying, rubbish, it won't turn out to be that at all. So when he's going along in the final episode telling Alex, you are the supreme Medjai, I believe in you, we kind of think, well, I don't blame Alex for not really believing him and having doubts that this is true, because most of what Ardeth tells him is absolute rubbish, quite frankly. But of course, he is featured more in season 2 than in season 1, Ardeth, because of all the secrets of the Medjai stuff and all the Medjai training going on.
We're not either of us crazy about the Medjai training, are we?
No.
It messes with Alex's head.
So Ardeth has become something of a figure of ridicule in our house, but perhaps others do enjoy his contribution to the cartoon more.
Well, no one likes the cartoon but us, do they?
Oh, well, everyone hates him then. And that, of course, leaves Alex. And I often wonder if they realised from the get-go that he was going to kind of evolve into the protagonist of the series, which I think is pretty indisputable that he does by about the 3rd episode of Series 2.
I always figured that they focused on him because he's a child and the one that the audience relates to. They tend to do that in cartoons, don't they?
Yeah. And I also wonder whether when they cast the actor in the role, they got someone who was 16, I was looking up, whilst recording the first series, and was therefore obviously going to have broken his voice by the time that recording finished and come back for series 2 sounding like a young man rather than a child. I wonder if they deliberately did that because they knew they were going to have Alex older in series 2 and take him on this journey. I mean, I think if that wasn't their plan all along, they should have cast someone younger, really, shouldn't they?
Yes, I suppose so, but he's very good, Chris Marquette.
They did, as I was saying earlier, what they should have done in The Mummy Returns. They found an American actor who could do it quite brilliantly and bring the best out of the character. I think Chris Marquette did an absolutely brilliant job of bringing the character to life and making us care about Alex and sympathise with Alex.
He's very good in that bit where Evie's dead as well.
That's right.
His mother, Evie.
And there's a lot of bits where they've obviously got him to say several times in different voices, Mom, Dad, and things like that.
Uncle Jonathan.
Yes, and then packs them in different places. But I think he's really at his best when he's doing these big in the emotion, in the plot line bits of dialogue, and he really carries them with such conviction and brings the character to life so well. He can put a lot into quite few words, like when Rick's telling him how proud he is of Alex after Alex had done these things and made the scarab fall off the Zephyr, and Alex puts a lot into thanks, Dad, and I can't do it anything like the same, but he puts a whole lot of emotion and history into that 2 words. And I like the way he says whoa when Ardith tells him that Amar was the first Medjai and you've just gone back in time and inspired the founding of the Medjai, and Alex is like, whoa. I think he puts a lot into that whoa. I think he makes the most of everything he's given, Chris Marquette.
Yeah, and people don't like him because he's ginger.
Which reminds me of what I wanted to say about the character design. I was mentioning the blue shirt earlier, which is put into Tomb of the Dragon Emperor as cartoon homage. Do you remember that?
I remember that you pointed it out at the time, but I can't actually visualise it.
I wondered when I watched this again, was it really homage to the cartoon? Was it really the same shirt, or did I just see what I wanted to see? But then I thought, no, it's the same shirt, and it's not like any of the other shirts on the Expedition. It's definitely cartoon homage. And of course, the orange hair complements the blue shirt, doesn't it?
Yes, blue and orange are opposites on the colour wheel, as everyone knows.
Exactly, so that's why Alex looks right, looks so well coordinated in his character design. He's got the blue shirt, and like I was saying about Tai in Digimon with all the blue, they're saying, here's a boy hero for you, aren't they? Alex with his blue shirt, and it's a nice blue, and I think it works.
Yes, it's rather a lot about men and boys, the whole thing.
And then his orange hair tops that off. Blonde in The Mummy Returns. So you could think he's a sort of gingery blonde in the cartoon, and they've drawn it orange.
I thought perhaps you were going to tell everybody about his trousers. I've been sitting here wondering, are we going to bother telling everyone Jake's summary and assessment of the main thing you got from the Mummy? Everybody should wear trousers.
Yes, in the first series I think Alex looks pretty stupid, and well, not stupid, I still like the character design, but I don't like his shorts that he has in the first series nearly as much as his long trousers that he has in the second series, which go very much better with the character and with the blue shirt and with the orange hair. But of course they back up the fact that Alex has grown up a lot between the 2 series, and he's quite literally out of short trousers in the second series.
To be fair, it's probably quite historically accurate, isn't it? It's set in the 30s, and boys wore shorts up to a point, and then graduated to long trousers.
And of course it's part of adapting his design from the Mummy Returns movie. If you look at the front cover of the DVD, you'll see him there with his shorts, with his slingshot, like he has in the Mummy Returns, but he doesn't use it in the series. And you see, yeah, so they've adapted that into the Alex design for the cartoon series. They've colour coordinated it very carefully, and then it's a good idea to move him into long trousers as soon as they can.
But then I was saying, wasn't I didn't like Imhotep not wearing trousers. But the first time I noticed that was in the explanation at the beginning about Imhotep, the evil high priest, trying to steal the manacle of Osiris and all that kind of thing, and he's walking along with his legs poking out of his coat, and I thought, oh, that looks so stupid, he should wear trousers. And I was telling you about that, and that was what made you say, everybody should wear trousers.
And it's true. As has been touched on already, when we come back for season 2, it's not only Alex's trousers that are different, but his voice, as we said. Now, it's breaking during the first series, isn't it? And there are some episodes, because obviously the dialogue isn't all recorded in order, where at times Alex sounds young and squeaky and quite believe that he's 11, and other times he sounds like a grown-up young man. And so by the time series 2 rolls around, he no longer sounds like a child, he sounds like a young man. A very nice voice of a young man, yes, but certainly you can't really have him as a child anymore. And I've read somewhere that the idea was he was 11 in season 1 and 13 in season 2. And I say, okay, 13 is about the youngest you can get away with for season 2, Alex, but I'll buy that. When I came across on CBBC a season 2 episode, and it was the bit where Alex and Evie were doing staff practice in the boat, and Alex tips Evie out of the boat, and that's the bit where he's starting to become a bit of a twat for no real reason. But I saw that and I thought, oh, well, that's interesting and unusual in cartoons. They've had the balls to go for having Alex grow up in the cartoon. He's about 16 now. Little did I realise that it was supposed to be set not that long after the first series. You can see why I would have thought that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And yes, I think coming in unprepared to the second series, you would think Alex was anything up to certainly 16 or maybe 17, and his voice is 17, as we know. But okay, we'll buy it's 13. And of course, they draw him taller in some scenes. He's as tall as Evie, it depends who's drawing him really, and he's catching up with his dad. And they draw him a lot buffer, bigger. Of course, he's been doing all this Medjai training as well as growing up, so that makes a lot of sense. And yes, he is a young man rather than a child in season 2, which fits in, of course, with his journey that he is going on and has been going on and will continue to go on. So it makes sense if there had been a kind of a time skip of a couple of years between the two series, but that doesn't really work out when you actually sit and watch the episode. First episode of the second series, because Rick and Evie are at the museum explaining to the curator, and that's how we lost the Zephyr, and that had happened at the end of the first series, and we're like, okay, it took 2 years for them to go and explain that to the curator, did it? I don't think that was the plan when that bit of the script was written. And Imhotep's been under this stone in the Paris catacombs for 2 years, I think. Okay. But it's obviously meant to be a bit of time has passed, because Colin Weasler has made all these comic books that he's selling illegally.
Yes, doesn't have a street vendor's license, does he?
So the script hasn't matched up the timings perfectly, and what with Alex appearing to be at least 2 years older since he started his Medjai training, anything up to 6 I think they could have got away with, quite frankly. It doesn't all work out perfectly, but never mind, because it's a cartoon and it makes sense in the context of Alex and his journey. Now, speaking of Alex's journey, it makes a lot of sense. At the end of the first series, Ada says to him, Alex, you saved my life, but now I'm going to train you as a Medjai. And we're like, come on, Alex, just say, no thank you, and walk away. But that does make sense. It's adapted from the films, where the Medjai is a big thing, and it makes sense for Alex that to be his journey. In the film, of course, the Medjai are the Pharaoh's soldiers, but they changed that in the cartoon. The Pharaoh's soldiers is something different. That's Imhotep's fear, the Pharaoh's soldiers, and the fear itself episode, which I think is a nice nod back to the movies. But we see there's a different backstory in the cartoon. The Medjai is created in order to combat evil like Imhotep's rather than it already existed out of the Pharaoh's guard. There we go, it's adapted from the film. But a thought I had while watching the series at one point, and I think Rosie engaged with this idea while we were watching it this time, was that Alex would have done just as well going to control himself and the manacle and how he interacted with the manacle in the Forbidden City in China episode called The Boy Who Would Be King in the first series, where Alex goes to China, well they all do, and meets the young emperor has the exact voice of Izzy of Digimon. And Alex learns to control the manacle to some extent and masters the incantation Medjai to move that which is without. The power lies within, which is his telekinetic power of the manacle activation speech. And he has a good, productive, and best of all, enjoyable time studying and learning to do that in China.
Yes, the Chinaman.
The wise old Chinese sensei sort of character, quite archetypal, but works well.
Yes, tells him calmly and sensibly the allegory, which I like. I think you quite like it too.
Yes.
About how a cup without a handle is a bowl, but a handle without a cup is useless. And I think, yes, Alex is the cup and the manacle is the handle that makes him just slightly better. And Alex engages with that and wants to learn, which is very important if you're going to learn anything, that you are willing and engage of your own volition. And this Chinese sensei character doesn't make him do dangerous obstacle courses and get lost in the desert and caught in a sandstorm and mess about with his head and make him lose all his confidence and then be overconfident, which actually is what happens when he's doing his Medjai training.
So really, it would have been better, and it would be good to have an alternative series to it, where Alex goes back and spends 3 or 4 months in China, in the Forbidden City, mastering the manacle in that way.
I like that scene. I think the Emperor's sort of gone off sulking, saying, I don't want to do this Tai Chi stuff, and then Alex stays and does the Tai Chi and listens to the dude telling him about the manacle. And I think, yes, that's the way to learn. You have to want to learn and have a good teacher.
Neither of which really happens with Ardeth in his Medjai training, as you were saying. There was a bit just before the Chinese episode in the first series, an episode called The Black Forest, which is also one of my favourite episodes. And I think in that one, Chris Marquette delivers the line really well. I know where Imhotep's got Einstein. I mean, give that to a bad voice actor, particularly a young one, that would sound absolutely stupid, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
But the way he says, I know where Imhotep's got Einstein, is absolutely perfect. But there's this sequence in that where Alex is going through this enchanted forest and dodging all these roots that are trying to kill him and tumbling down this hill and defeating this killer topiary and then closing this drawbridge where he pulls this rusty old lever to close it. And I say, Alex is demonstrating there more than enough innate skill and strength and ability to pass any Medjai training course that he's given later. And because he's just on his own getting on with it, because he knows it's important, he knows he has to do it, he knows he wants to do it to save his family, he gets on and does it brilliantly. But then when Ardeth Bay starts messing with his head later and getting him down on himself, Alex, as you say, loses confidence in his abilities. And later in the series, as you also said, he gets overconfident and then he just turns into a right bastard, horrible, insensitive twat to his parents for absolutely no reason, which I don't like at all. So yeah, the Medjai training is not really that good for Alex in many ways. However, it does make sense as part of the show, and I have a list of contemporaries of Alex's who guest star in various episodes, list in my mind, of the ones I like, who are used well and who are good characters, and the ones I don't like. And at the bottom of the list, we have the character Ishi, who's this bitchy Aborigine tribe girl from an island near Australia.
I guess it's the old mistake of, right, this needs to be a strong female woman, so we better make her feisty, which is synonymous with total cow to some people.
And then just above her is Simon Montgomery, who mentions Bram Stoker's The Mummy, and you were doing a little impression of him earlier, and that is Thomas Dekker of Extreme Ghostbusters fame, doing his English accent, and he does just as good a job with it, doesn't he, as Evie and Jonathan, and he was probably, about 16 recording that. So he does a fine job there, but he has to say all these horrible Americanisms, like penlight and my mum's tuna noodle casserole. We don't really have tuna noodle casserole.
But we do have clam bakes, or is that just Uncle Reginald?
And he's been to a shoelace convention in Liverpool. God. When I saw Sabrina Goes to Rome, I thought, how can you make the bad use of Tara Strong? And then when I watch the Puzzle of Horus episode of The Mummy, I think, how can you make the bad use of Thomas Dekker? And there is the answer, Simon Montgomery. And then we go up through that list, through characters like the Cloud people, young people who I like, and the Emperor of China, Jin Wu, who I like, all the way up to Fadil and Janet, who are the two young Medjai characters. Medjai in training, who Alex meets at the Medjai Academy, who are at the top of my list of companions for Alex. They are introduced in the episode called The Dark Medjai, which I talked a bit about earlier, and you get the start of the development of their relationships, both of them with Alex there, which are continued in the episode Trio, which I mentioned earlier. So I think they're both very good aspects of the show, and are worth having the Medjai training for, if nothing else.
Yes, Fadil is a boy and Janet is a girl, and Fadil's the bitchy one. He's the bully with a soft marshmallowy centre, who you find a particularly interesting sort of character, don't you?
Yes, I do indeed.
Bit of a face-off alpha male rivalry situation with Alex, and then Alex and Janet save him and the other Medjai trainees from getting buried alive in sand, and then they come to an understanding.
As Fadil says to Alex, you are the better Medjai, and Alex says, no, Fadil, we're all a team. Which is a nice moment.
Yes, and Janet isn't bitchy, but of course she might be if she hadn't introduced herself as a boy. As it is, she's a very supportive and useful adventure peril companion, and reveals herself to be a girl when they have to get over this bridge that will kill any man who crosses it. And I quite like that bit, because people who tend to be slightly older than me, because we don't really accept this nowadays, go around saying, oh yes, man means man and woman. And I think, well, no, it doesn't actually, because whenever anyone's written it in the olden days, they have been excluding women. Like if you read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, there is evil in all men. It doesn't mean men and women. The only female characters within that are a couple of hysterical maids with no depth whatsoever. And Janet's bridge crossing proves it. Whoever wrote that, it never occurred to them that a woman would come and cross the deadly bridge.
That's right. And she is, of course, the first female Medjai, because a woman is not allowed to be a Medjai. Alex is using his translation skills, being the best of Evie in that. No man may cross. Is that what it says? Word for word? And then, of course, that's really quite lazy bit of writing, the bridge that kills you if you're a man, so that Janet reveals that she is a woman. But in a 20-minute cartoon, it works perfectly well. And it's a very loaded 20-minute cartoon, that one, the Dark Medjai episode, with a lot in it. So I don't hold anything against that bridge. It does its job, and it's a necessary job. And of course, Alex and Janet do a great job in that, being a team and supporting each other, and basically saving Cardiff from being killed by the Dark Medjai, his old boyfriend.
They should have just let him die.
And
he's so rubbish.
And saving all the others from the sand trap. And they make a great team there. And obviously Tom Pugsley and Greg Klein, who adapted the films into the premise of the cartoon and wrote a lot of episodes.
Developed for television by
That's right.
those two guys.
Obviously, they knew that Janet and Fadil were important, because they wrote the other episode about the two of them, Trio. And I was interested to see that Tom and Greg, as I call them now, Tom Pugsley and Greg Klein, also wrote the Extreme Ghostbusters episode Rage, that we like so much, praise so much on our podcast about it.
Yeah, it's pregnant with family stuff, particularly between men, and the episode with Rick's father, Jack, which they also wrote, didn't they? Practically identical to Rage.
I say Tom and Greg are very skilled at squeezing a heck of a lot into a 20-minute cartoon, particularly involving male family relations, but involving a lot of other compelling stuff as well. I think it would have been the obvious thing to do, and I think it was probably in the pipeline that Alex and Janet would have a ship. You, I think, get the start of it in the Dark Medjai episode, where he's going to you're full of surprises. And then she's a girl, and wow, you really are full of surprises. I am a woman. Oh, thank God for that, thinks Alex.
Yes, she's shown him her hair on her head.
But it's not overt, of course. There isn't really time for it to be overt. But it's another thing that is included in that episode, and it would have made sense to continue with it in the future, and I think it was where they were going, don't you?
Yes, I expect so. Certainly it ought to be. It's the best thing.
Yes, quite. Now, they don't revisit it in Trio because Janet keeps her headscarf on in that, and if you watch Trio, you won't realise that she's actually a girl. But that's so we can watch it and then still come back and watch Dark Medjai later if we haven't seen it and be surprised, isn't it?
Yes, and as we were saying, she's not quite sure which voice to do, the actress, her boy's voice or her girl's voice.
I think her boy voice, her fake boy voice, is really, really good. But I think her girl voice, you can tell that she's actually an older woman doing it. She's in her 50s, I think, when she did it. I think it's more suitable for her boy voice. And then, yes, in her second appearance in Trio, I've thought to myself a few times, oh, she's not sure which voice she's doing here. Bit her boy voice, bit her girl voice. She's in front of Fadil, who doesn't know yet. Nobody really knows what voice she's supposed to be doing.
Yes, and it can't be easy for her. If she could see what was happening every scene, she might think, oh, well, I'll do my girl voice when I'm alone with Alex and put on my boy voice for Fadil. But, of course, they record the voices before it's animated, and you just don't know, do you? I can see why she was confused.
So that was difficult for her, but she's called, still alive, not was, Jeannie Elias, I think. And Fadil is voiced by Jeff Bennett, who is in a lot of stuff like Jim Cummings, and we'll be talking soon about another cartoon they're both in, but more about that in the near future. When we were going to watch Trio on the DVD, which is the last episode before the final two-parter, where stuff happens, some of which I like and some I don't. But when we were going to watch Trio, I said to Rosie, I have nominated this as my favourite episode overall. Not sure if it is really. It's the only one that doesn't have Rick in it. It's very much about Alex and Janet and Fadil, and I think it very much shows us where the show should be going in future, if it has a future, which it actually doesn't. But I think it's one that's pregnant with possibilities for the future of the show. But is that enough to make it my favourite episode of the Mummy cartoon series? And then after we watched it, I said, yes, actually it is my favourite. One thing it does, and this is what I promised to come back to earlier, is successfully marry up the two parts of the show's title, The Mummy, Secrets of the Medjai. And really no other episode in Series 2 does match that up properly. Trio has Imhotep doing something evil, that's the Mummy, and Alex, Janet and Fadil stop him, and that's Secrets of the Medjai. I said it was nice to see Imhotep involved with that stuff in a compelling and believable way, and so I think that is my favourite episode, not just because I like what it offers for Alex and Janet and Fadil and their future together, but also how it includes Imhotep, who's supposed to be big title character, main antagonist, and it also rather nicely built upon Alex's gaining greater control over the manacle. Alex, you use the manacle, but you're not tired. And so it fitted in with the overall arc of the series rather well in that way too, and I think you understood why I felt that way, didn't you?
Yes, certainly. Of course, if they had carried on, they weren't going to have the balls or the ovaries to not have Imhotep in it, were they? Because they finish up with, oh look, we've defeated Imhotep, but he's going to come back and keep bothering us.
I feel that Imhotep's kind of redundant by that stage, and the Secrets of the Medjai aspect is where it should be concentrating. But a great thing about Trio is that we see a new kind of family teamwork, Alex and his new family, his Medjai family. And don't they do a fantastic job, the three of them? They all make their contributions with their own special skills, like flying the aeroplane and reconfiguring the electricity. and do some fantastic teamwork as a trio, which is why trio is the great title for the episode. And it's really nice to see how in that one Fadil has grown and developed as a character. We see that he actually suffers with a tremendous lack of self-confidence, which undoubtedly is his father's fault. They don't tell us that specifically. And we meet his younger brother, Safine, at the beginning, and we see the nice relationship they have. And we see Fadil as a deeper character, and we're obviously going to care quite a lot about him and learn a lot about him in the future. I absolutely love how supportive Alex is of Fadil in that episode. When Fadil first met Alex, he was an absolute bastard to him, but Alex is not holding that against him now and supports Fadil physically and emotionally throughout the episode and allows him to gain greater confidence in himself. And that, I think, shows Alex's future as a great Medjai and a great leader of Medjai. That's why I think that episode is very important for the show as a whole, for that group relationship, and why I'm keeping it as my favourite. Much as I love Rick and Eva and Jonathan and Alex doing stuff, I think that trio episode has the most going for it in terms of dimensions in the past, present, and future. See what I mean?
Yes, very much so. I don't have a favourite, but I do like that one, and the other one with Janet and Fadil, and the one with Jack, Grandpa, and the one in New York, which is the only one of those four in season 1, but actually season 1 is overall better, we thought, didn't we?
Yes, I think it's definitely true. Season 1 is overall makes more sense, has overall better quality episodes. But you pluck out a few from season 2 and you get the absolute best work in the series as a whole. The 2 Janet and Fadil episodes, the Jack episode, which also has the Scarab, who I think is an absolutely brilliant villain, much better than Imhotep. But then also in series 2, you've got the not so good ones. The one with the agoraphones, who are these bird women who are supposed to be funny and really are not. And you've got the bits where Alex is being an absolute dick for no reason. And the inclusion of Anaxunamun and Princess Nefertari, I don't think is that good. I like the Back in Time one in series 2 with a bit of predestination. But overall, I like series 1 more. And I would have more good things in total to say about series 1. I like all the episodes there. My least favourite one there being the penultimate one, the one with Simon. All the rest, I think, are very good in many ways. So yeah, series 1 better overall. Series 2, some jewels of episodes, but overall rather unsure of itself, rather not matching up the Mummy and Secrets of the Medjai, rather poorer.
One more thing I think is worth saying, since I mentioned this on the Sabrina podcast. If you haven't quite got the idea about Jonathan, it's revealed in the Fear Itself episode. He's afraid of clowns. And that should tell you everything you need to know about what they're trying to do with that character most of the time.
And what's good about that episode is Jonathan has the rather stupid fear of clowns fear. Colin Weasley has the rather stupid naked in public fear. But neither of those are overused and interfere with the flow of the episode. And they do have some rather nice fears for the other characters. Alex's fear is that the manacle will go crazy and he can't control it. Rick's was that he couldn't protect his family. And as I mentioned, Imhotep's fear is very good. The Pharaoh's soldiers. And he's going, no, and they're coming to mummify him.
They couldn't be bothered to think of anything quite that interesting for Evie, as she is a woman, and they're better at writing about men, these people. She's afraid of falling through the ice.
As I said at the time, that's a very American thing to do, isn't it? Fall through the ice as a child.
Yes, I suppose it is, although there was more ice in England in the olden days.
That's true. She's not quite old enough for the frozen Thames, but yes, there was more ice around in those days.
And that's another episode that I enjoyed the first time I watched it back in the early noughties. And when Jake produced this astonishing DVD, I thought, oh yes, I remember this one really rather well.
Well, I'll just say what I find disappointing about the end couple of episodes, which is that the Scarab, who I love, uses
You love him.
the most terrible MacGuffin ever to nullify the powers of the Manacle, and so the Manacle doesn't work anymore. So all this build-up throughout the two series, Alex has been gaining greater control of the Manacle. He's only quite recently got control of the second power, Shimin Rapidu,
Walk among the birds.
Yep, the jumping one. And now, he can't use them anymore. And of course it has that anomalous power in the werewolf episode called Howl. I call upon the power of the Manacle to bring forth what is left of this world, which he uses to bring Rick back from being a werewolf. And I say, well, it'd be worth trying that when he's dead, wouldn't it? Even if it's not going to work for some reason, but no, it occurs. But anyway, yes, in this final two-parter, when the Manacle has been nullified and Alex is quite reasonably getting rather frustrated about that. And again, it makes him lose confidence in himself. But then, I was saying they could have got away with it if they found a way to revitalise the Manacle for the final episode. Alex learned in the penultimate episode to rely on himself, his own skills, his Scarab, as well as the Manacle. But then in the final episode, of course, they introduced the Supreme Medjai thing, and Ardith is like, well, you don't need the Manacle anyway, just use your magic powers. It doesn't matter, you've got magic powers, now go and use them and defeat him. Which is a bit of a letdown after all the Manacle build-up, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what was the point of it all? I remember we were watching it, which I should because it was very recently. I've not gone that mad yet. And it's only the second time I've seen your DVD, so I guess the third time I've seen the series altogether. And I was watching it, and the Scarab had used the MacGuffin to end all MacGuffins, and I was just merrily thinking, oh, well, they'll reactivate the Manacle somehow, and you were sitting there going, the Manacle. And I said, what, aren't they going to make it work again? And you said no, and I thought, well, that's so stupid, man.
And it particularly rankles in the very previous episode. Yana was saying, oh, you're not tired anymore, you're really gaining mastery of it. It's obviously not where they were going originally, and it's a bit of a cop-out at the end. It's a great scene where Alex starts using his powers and beats the absolute crap out of Imhotep and all these Jinn warriors. Reminds me of the final episode of Teen Titans, where Beast Boy finally unleashes all his great potential and kicks the absolute living daylights out of Slade.
We'd all like to turn into a T-Rex and do that to someone, wouldn't we?
And Alex does very much the same thing at the end, but it would be so much better if he was doing it with the Manacle and his own Medjai skills, which he'd been working on both of them and working in conjunction, honing them for this moment.
Conquered that fear of the Manacle taking over.
Exactly, it would be a nice culmination of both series, rather than, oh well, he's the Supreme Medjai, so he doesn't need the Manacle anyway. But it's still a great scene. And when, in the very first episode, Imhotep is dragging Alex around the temple, I always think of Extreme Ghostbusters. You never know when the situation might be reversed. In the final episode, it is reversed. And it's Alex who is chucking Imhotep around, and we're all feeling very titillated whilst watching it. I remember reading, I hadn't seen it on the telly at the end of the second series, but I remember reading about it on the internet when I was going to write fan fiction, including the Mummy cartoon series, and I read how the final episode has Alex realise his destiny as Supreme Medjai and defeat the Mummy and throw him into the underworld. And I thought, oh, good. They actually have the balls to finish the series off properly and bring it to the conclusion we're all wanting to see. But then, of course, it's rather mitigated when you actually watch the episode, isn't it? And Alex is doing it not as a culmination of his journey that he's been on, as we've just been talking about. And also, the Minotaur says at the end, well, he'll soon be back for new alliances in the underworld, and we'll have seen the last of the Mummy. And we're like, oh, you really want to carry on with that if the series gets renewed, do you? Not such a good idea. I think you should really go back to Trio and see how you can adapt that. And there are lots of things you could have done with it. Not all the exact things I wrote in my virtual season, but some aspects being the same. You could adapt it in a lot of interesting ways, couldn't you?
That would have been quite a leap of faith, wouldn't it? Removing the title character and the thing that originates in the Jewel of Seven Stars that inspired the entire franchise. I guess they didn't dare, and the network didn't dare either.
So perhaps, really, that's to do with the decision just to cancel it shortly before the second series finished airing, rather than trying to adapt it in a believable and compelling way. So that makes it even more of a shame that Alex defeating the Mummy wasn't the definitive end as it should be. But there we go.
They didn't want another New Adventures of He-Man on their hands, I guess. What a load of rubbish that was.
Yes, I mean, if it had had the same character designs and voice actors and things, that would have been a start. But there we go.
Bit of a tangent, isn't it?
So there we are. Plenty of thoughts there on The Mummy. From Bram Stoker's novel, The Jewel of Seven Stars, right through to, well, this year we actually mentioned at one point, didn't we, the latest thing. And the things that we like and dislike and feel rather mixed feelings about in between. And that brings this podcast to an end, and not a premature one. I'm sure I should be bashing away for hours editing this one, but there we go. When you next join us, we will be doing our 2017 update podcast, but that's going to be in the middle of January 2018. And there's a few things that we've watched more of that we'll tell you about, like Gladiators, for instance.
Animaniacs.
Yes, indeed, and Back to the Future, the animated series. We have to come back to some thoughts about that, just a couple of quick ones. But hopefully over Christmas, we're going to see Watership Down to talk about, and we haven't actually seen while we're recording this, hopefully it would have been on by the time it's released on New Year's Eve, Hey Arnold, the Jungle Movie, which we'll want to talk about for a bit, I would think. So there'll be quite a bit to say in that update podcast for 2017 in January 2018. And then at the end of January, we'll come back with our next regular podcast, which came into my mind just now because it's going to be on something that has Jim Cummings, Imhotep, and Jeff Bennett, Fadil, in it quite heavily. So you might as well announce now what it is.
Earthworm Jim. Not the computer game, never played it, but the cartoon series.
So we'll have to come back to our Jim Cummings and Jeff Bennett marathon after the update podcast for our first regular podcast of 2018. So, a happy new year to you. Do join us again in a couple of weeks for our update, and until then, good night out there.
Whatever you are.